We're going to go over just a few quick goals for today. This is going to be a little bit different format than our traditional kind of Monday morning format. So I think this hopefully will be a little bit different for folks. And what we're going to do is really try and highlight areas where there's some contrast. There's some real key issues where we have some differing ideas in our legislature right now. And as we get into the last 2 weeks, it's important that we get down to business in terms of what those real policy discussions are. So hopefully today you'll get some real commentary, plenty of meat in terms of policy and where we're at. So from an overview perspective standpoint, I think there's a couple of things to share. You know, one is there's been a lot of talk about compromise, and that's important. That's something we want to do. But it's time to get past talking points. And so we're going to talk about the issues where we need to come together and the differences between some of the policies that are flowing through the legislature. We also want to get beyond, rhetoric around bold change. We hear a lot from the fourth floor about what is bold change. We want bold change. We're here to tell you today that we do not think that the ideas coming from the administration are bold change. They simply do not have a big enough impact to move the needle on the key issues in our state like education and job.
Senate Bill 640, which I'm very proud to be the sponsor of, looked at what we were doing the last 4 years in this debate, and I proceeded with very much a bill that concentrates on 3 different areas. And one is to identify those students who are in need of remediation, meaning that they need help on reading, and it starts in kindergarten. This complements what I've been pushing the last 4 years, which is the early childhood education piece. Once we've identified those students who need help, Senate Bill 640 pushes for a consistent remediation program or help getting the students to read it at the levels that we expect them as they move through our system. And last but not least, Senate Bill 640 concentrates heavily on professional development. We have been talking about creating a world-class education system. We need to give our teachers those resources, that continuing professional development that we know makes educational systems around the world something that people can talk about. We have been talking about creating a world-class education system. We need to give our teachers those resources, that continuing professional development that we know makes educational systems around the world something that people can talk about.
I too would want to thank all of you for being here. We appreciate the time that you're taking to be able to have a dialogue and to make it as informal as possible to make sure that we're answering questions that you may have, whatever they are pertaining to education. Having been in the classroom and really working closely with our education community, it's extremely important that when we're talking about education and initiatives, that we move past the reform efforts that we see nationwide, and that we really look at transforming education in the state of New Mexico. And in many ways, I am very proud of New Mexico for resisting a lot of those reform efforts that are actually have gone through many states, and seeing a lot of those negative effects of moving so quickly around those reform movements. We know what No Child Left Behind has done. We know that it was revolved around standardized based assessments. We're now in the race to the top era, and it basically is doing the same thing, revolving around those. And we want to ensure that when we go through and we look at what's taking place in the classroom, what's taking place at the school site is accurately measured. And so that's where one of the bills that we have out there, Senate Bill 587, that looks at the 8th through F grading system. We want it to be understandable. We want to make sure that the schools are being measured accurately, and to ensure that the statistical formula that's used is going to be done so properly to ensure that we do have an accurate representation of the school site and what they're doing. You know, there's a lot of myths that are out there when it comes to education. We hear about how horrible their education system is doing, and a lot of those are myths. And when we look at the actual data and look at what's out there, our classrooms are really in many ways exceeding the odds. Statistically, we're 49th in poverty. When you look at statistically and what poverty means with academic achievement, we should be 49th in educational achievement. We're not. And if you look at where we're at year after year, we're not where we want to be, maybe 30, 31, 32 consistently. You'll hear different numbers that are out there, but we do have the data to be able to show that and to be able to present what's happening in the classroom. And that means that our educators are going through and defying the odds. Where we should be, where we are poverty level, we're not. but it's not where we want to be. And that's why we want to transform education. That's why we want to move it forward and to be able to do it in an accurate way. And when we're talking about professionals, how are we going to evaluate them? How are we going to go through and ensure that they are meeting the needs of the student, but at the same time is giving that room for opportunity of improvement? And I believe that we do have a plan that's in place here. Again, is moving past a lot of the reform efforts that are out there that haven't worked in other states. New Mexico has stood strong. New Mexico is still standing strong to ensure we're going to do what's right for New Mexico, and that we're going to go through and have an education system that we can be proud of. And I believe that we have plans that are in place. So I appreciate those employees who are not able to be with us today, but are in the classroom today doing the work that needs to be done.
Good morning, everyone. I, again, endorse what has been stated by my colleagues previous, but when we talk about what we're doing on behalf of our children in the state of New Mexico, one measure that I've introduced last year and again this year, which is Senate Bill 474, talks about intervention and working with the students at the onset. If we know what the students, if they have some issues, if there are some concerns with regards to what their abilities are for reading and math, then we have an opportunity to work with the students. Again, 474 works specifically with reading and math intervention, working with them, making sure that the parents are involved at the earliest stage to make sure the parents are included, family members, they are brought up to speed as to exactly where and what the expectations are. There is money in this particular issue. When we talk about working with our professionals, our teachers in the school system, we have to put money in to pay for the services that we are asking them to provide. And it's not just the reading coaches, it actually works with reading interventionists, math interventionists. The teachers would be able to work in small group surroundings, no more than a small group of up to 8 students. And that to me, and if you talk to other teachers who are out, who are the interventionists working in our school districts, this is what makes the difference. But again, looking at to the tune of $67 million, that's what the price tag is when you're talking about investing in our children. This is what the price tag is. It's the reality of it. And it's not just reading. This is talking about reading and math. Both of them go hand in hand when we talk about what's the future for our economy, what we're looking at for the STEM. This is what it is. It's about math and reading because, working two sides of the brain, we have to work hand in hand. If the student doesn't grasp it at the early years, well, it's kind of harder for them to grasp what math is. Reading, it's the same. So that's the focus of the bill, and again, I believe that complements what my colleague Senator Sapien has with his professional development to offer for teachers and all of the other issues that we have to support our schools, because that is what we need to continue doing. And that to me, and if you talk to other teachers who are out, who are the interventionists working in our school districts, this is what makes the difference. But again, looking at to the tune of $67 million, that's what the price tag is when you're talking about investing in our children. This is what the price tag is. It's the reality of it. And it's not just reading. This is talking about reading and math. Both of them go hand in hand when we talk about what's the future for our economy, what we're looking at for the STEM. This is what it is. It's about math and reading because, working two sides of the brain, we have to work hand in hand. If the student doesn't grasp it at the early years, well, it's kind of harder for them to grasp what math is. Reading, it's the same. So that's the focus of the bill, and again, I believe that complements what my colleague Senator Sapien has with his professional development to offer for teachers and all of the other issues that we have to support our schools, because that is what we need to continue doing. Thank you.
One of my questions that I have is, as far as the retention bill, as far as the Senate Bill 640, would this bill include mandatory retention?
What we're looking at, and I appreciate Senator Scholes being my vice chair, because he brings a wealth of knowledge, having been an educator at all levels, as well as an administrator. But what the studies are showing is that retention, and especially mandatory retention, just doesn't work. When you look at the numbers, and Senator Scholes can speak to this, if I mess it up, he can correct me. The rhetoric has been that students who are not reading 3rd or 4th grade are 4 times more likely not to graduate. Well, that comes from a study, the Casey study, that basically was the only longitudinal study out there. The problem is it concentrated that 4 times more likely to not graduate was only 16% of the students. So 4% weren't reading 3rd or 4th grade, 16% didn't graduate on time, so that's your 4 times factor. What they're not looking at is the 84% of students who were maybe not reading and proficiency in 3rd or 4th grade. 84% of students did graduate on time. So if we go down the road of a mandatory retention system, we're going to penalize, theoretically, statistically, 84% of our students. I'm not going to accept that. So what Senate Bill 640 does is it allows our parents to be involved every step. And there's a piece in my bill in 640 that requires school districts to report to PED. Right now we have no reporting function at all about students who have been suggested to be retained. What 640 does is it creates a structure for the school district to report to PED on those students who have been suggested to be retained, but the parents have signed off, and then it tracks that student. So the next year when that student moves, let's say, was suggested retained in kindergarten, parents said, nope, I want them to go to the 1st grade. Well, if they're gonna then matriculate from the 1st to 2nd grade, the school district needs to show PED that that student is proficient and being able to move forward. So there's some sunshine, if you will, to this whole process, but mandatory retention countrywide is showing that it doesn't work. There's no sense in bringing that to the state of Mexico.
One aspect that your bill would change, though, is reporting the student's progress or lack thereof to PED.
Correct. So
That
right
doesn't
now,
currently exist.
that doesn't currently exist.
Okay.
So that piece would add to the transparency, if you will, to really put it on school districts now to take that next step. And if they are not going to suggest retain that student again when the student does need to be retained, why? And so it creates an interaction between the school district and PED to assure that we're just not pushing these students along, that we really are. The difference between what the governor's office is suggesting with Senate Bill 260. Senate Bill 260, which was tabled, only was concentrated on kindergarten through 3rd grade and didn't speak at all to the progression of 4th through 8th grade. Senate Bill 640, the bill I'm sponsoring, and Senate Bill 474 that Senator Lopez is sponsoring, both continue to work with our children 4th through 8th grade so that we're not leaving them hanging. The challenge we have is that people are being fed statistics and they're being fed catchphrases that it isn't working. What we're looking at is the actual data on the ground. And if we're trying to make decisions based on the sale of 4 times likely and you dive down and it's only 16% of our students, I would say that our public is not being made aware of the whole picture. There was a survey referred to by the Secretary Designate of 70% of New Mexicans would support mandatory retention. Well, Senator Souls made a great point. I guarantee that 70% didn't know the actual fact that if we do mandatorily retain, statistically we'd be holding back 84% of students who don't deserve to be retained. Of students who don't deserve to be retained.
But what would you say to people that say that you've got a kid who doesn't know how to read at the end of 3rd grade? You say that you promote them anyway, even after, even if the parents get that one-time waiver?
So the beauty of Senate Bill 640 and Senate Bill 474 is the intervention programs that are mandated within the bills. We're not just having these students out on their own. We're working with them through the student assessment team to help them with their skill sets as they proceed forward. And we're not situated, let me put it this way, the bill itself allows for the continuous working with the student all the way.
It's a great example of where we draw a distinction between why are we just talking about 3rd grade, for example. What my 2 colleagues are talking about is every year of their education. That's a much bigger, bolder idea than just drawing an arbitrary line.
When you actually look at the research, retaining a student at 3rd grade and looking at a similar student who was socially promoted, and if you look at their results the next year, there is no difference. Occasionally, the retained student does better at that grade level, but not at the age level, and so it appears that you get an arbitrary or a very short gain, but even that goes away within the next 2 years. And I think the whole point of these bills compared to 260 is it never gives up on students. And if you retain students at third grade when we know that that isn't going to improve their outcomes, we want to continue to deal with them in fourth grade and get them remediation, get them assistance. We're going to deal with them in fifth grade and get them help and remediation and assistance, and in sixth grade, and we're never going to give up on that student until they are reading better, because we know that a number of students don't get it by third grade, but they're going to get it later.
If a child cannot read at a minimal level by the end of the third grade, he should be promoted.
Absolutely. And the research indicates that. And indicates that there are some students aren't going to get it until the next year or the year after. And holding them back doesn't improve that outcome in their future years. And so holding them back becomes a penalty and has severe consequences on self-concept. It increases their likelihood of dropping out later on. It doesn't have positive outcomes for that individual child. And again, I think the biggest key in all of these is these two bills don't give up on the child at third grade and essentially make them a throwaway where we know that they will actually increase their likelihood of dropping out by retaining them. We're going to keep working with that student so that they'll get
With
success.
regards to the two reading measures that are still currently in front of the Senate, for us to hear and see what the outcome is in Senate Finance. If the two bills go on and of course go through the House and then go up to the governor, it is my hope that she would strongly consider them and sign them, because it still meets a lot of the parameters that Senate Bill 260 has. If you look at all three measures that have been in front of the legislature, there are many commonalities, but there are some particular issues that have some concern for us. There's the 95% requirement for attendance. Excuse me, but how many of us are anywhere in school, work, or whichever at 95%? I mean, there's some issues that come around that, issues about being sick, all the other things that come up within our daily lives, and for students the same. When you talk about a mandatory third grade, that's the line in the sand, and as my colleagues have stated, that's something that does not show, there is nothing statistically anywhere, any report that shows that truly improves the outcomes for our children to read at third grade level. There are so many other issues that come into the factor also. If you're an English language learner, some other issues, when you're learning two different languages, you're going through that process, you're learning two languages, not just monolingual, you're bilingual. Studies have shown you come up to speed in about another 3 or 4 years later, but by then you were so much stronger than just a single monolingual person. So there's a lot of things that we go in, and I think what we have on these bills going forward is an opportunity. I mean, everything pretty much to the point that the governor wants is there, and we are working on behalf of our students. We cannot forget our students, because that's our future. But you cannot, kick it out with the baby with the bathwater. You have to work. We have to be persistent and continue to work with them.
This should be a political agenda item. This is about the kids. And as the Chairwoman Lopez mentioned, the reading bills that are moving forward in the Senate compared to the ones that have been tabled, in the majority, they're very similar. But the only sticking point is the mandatory retention side. And I think we've stated several times, and we're more than happy to get you the data on it, is that mandatory retention just does not work. And there's been studies to prove it.
And we're talking about third grade retention, and I just want to just back up a little bit and give an idea why is third grade so big? Where did that come from? Why is that the magic area? And a lot of the things that we're dealing with right now with some of the reform efforts in New Mexico, they may be newly introduced to New Mexico, but they're not new nationwide. And it started, there was 6 clusters, and this is basically the playbook. And you can look at it, and I'd be happy to share this, the playbook that's used on the 6 clusters, and we can see step-by-step efforts that have been done. But historically speaking, why third grade? And what we saw in Florida is that because students will be taking the test in 4th grade, and you go through it, it's revolved around a standardized based assessment again, and because they're going to do that, the effort was those students, whether they were had disabilities, or English language learners, or different barriers that were there, were held back. And those students that went on to the 4th grade, they took the test, their scores skyrocketed. But what was happening is there was discrimination of students that took place in the Florida system, and we've seen it in other areas. So I just want to make sure and back up and show exactly why that 3rd grade component came in. As my colleagues are saying, is that we see the student as a whole person, not a data point, not an area where we can go through and utilize their testing abilities, but seeing what they offer. And the student may be gifted in the arts, may be gifted in other areas, other subjects, and may be struggling with some of the reading. And that's what I believe my colleagues are trying to do, is to ensure that we're going to educate that student, take the strengths that they have and assist them with those weaknesses that they may be needing. And so those are things that I really want to bring out and give a historical perspective of where we're at and why it is that we're standing so strong in advocating for the students.
Let me just add one point about the governor's veto. You know, what Senator Sapien said about making this not political, if she cares about kids, she should sign any bill that helps education that gets to her desk, regardless of who the author is or regardless of the specifics. And I think similarly, if she's serious about compromise, she needs to engage with us on these ideas, which frankly are much bigger and much bolder than just a simple third grade piece that she's proposed.
That's the beauty of our system in terms of allowing our committee process to evaluate the bills in the specific areas. We have some phenomenal past educators, school board members, and business people on the education committee. We have thoroughly vetted Senate Bill 260, and again, there are some challenges with the mandatory retention piece that we've stated. So from the standpoint of continued conversation, Senate Bill 640 and Senate Bill 474 have attributes that are in Senate Bill 260. And so we need to look at the positive side of what we can move forward, what would be best for the kids. And again, wondering where a bill is left at becomes a political piece that I don't think should be part of our educational conversation. As the chair of Senate Education, I'll tell you that I have had conversations with Secretary Designate Scantera and with their deputies, and we continue to discuss how we can improve the New Mexico educational system. We have a K3 Plus program, which Chairwoman Amy Stewart has championed for the last 10 years, which we are working hand in hand with PD to assure as those applications from school districts go out to vie for that money, that it's done in a prudent fashion. So there is conversation going on. As far as proposed legislation, the door is always open. I've asked my committee to always look at compromise, and as Tim mentioned, we have compromised, and now it's time to really go down the road with what is very much seen as a database driven opportunity in terms of Senate Bill 640 and Senate Bill 474. And so the door will always be open for conversation, but now we need to move forward.
Thank you, and I wanted just to first of all commend our House Education Committee and Chairwoman Stewart on the work that was done with House Bill 3, and really the efforts that were made to ensure that we were going to have a budget that would ensure that that money was getting to the classroom, and I commend the work that you've done there. Where we sit right now in the budget is a huge concern, because we hit the recession, as we're all aware of. We had cuts in the student equalization guarantee, or the formula, which affected school districts across the state. We haven't recovered from that. And then you add on top of that the possible loss of funding with the maintenance of effort, with the state not adhering to what was needed with special ed monies. It's a concern, because that's another hit that's going to be there with the school. But we've actually gone through these last couple of years, last year and this year, and made an effort to really plug in some money that would assist schools. Unfortunately, where the majority of that money has gone, has actually gone what we call below the line, under the discretion of PED, to be able to utilize for programs and projects that in reality are new programs. And that's a concern, because when we're trying to recover from a recession and we're talking about the budget, we really need to stabilize our school districts and to be able to assist them in the funding that goes directly to the classroom. And the concern that we have here with our budget as it sits right now is there are some new projects and programs that are out there. There's a $4.5 million in that budget right now that is for a new graduation program. We sit on the LASC, that's the interim committee, and this is a program that really we didn't hear anything about. And so this is something that's come out of the blue, but yet it's in the funding right now. We see that there's an additional amount of money that's been put in, $4 million, that would supposedly were supposed to go to help struggling DNF schools. We were with the idea that this was going to go directly to provide resources for those schools. And what was used is that money was sent to the University of Virginia to train schools that were supposedly struggling. Well, what we saw there was actually there was schools that were sent that didn't even have DRF schools, but they were sent for training, and that's a concern because we've raised the budget there as well. And again, that money's not going directly to the schools. And we also have the discussion of merit pay, which is in there right now. And merit pay is a huge concern simply because what we've seen, what's happened in other states. It goes along with the clusters that I talked about. It's nothing new nationwide, but it is newly introduced in New Mexico. And when we talk about merit pay, what we see is there a huge concern of what it does to employees, what it does as far as the focus on teaching to the test, and how you go through and have certain teachers who would have the ability to be able to get some of those incentives, where other teachers, because they don't teach those tested subjects, would not have the ability to do that. So those are some huge concerns. And when we look at the money that's above the line currently, it's basically going to be utilized to pay the bills. Nothing going to be there that actually goes through that impacts student learning. And that's a concern, because if we really want to make sure that we have continual improvement, then we've got to provide the resources. We've got to understand that poverty has got to be part of the discussion, and as a state, the commitment needs to be there to ensure that we're assisting those school districts as much. The research that was done and seeing the same problems that happen in other states are what we're experiencing right now, because it's utilizing what's called a value-added model. And it's a statistical model that really is unstable, and we saw grades that changed from January to July, drastic changes. We're going through in the bill that we have in Senate Bill 587 would keep the A through F system in place, A, B, C, D, or F, because we do believe that it's something that's more understandable. What's not understandable is how school districts can go through and how it can be replicated to be able to explain how we're able to get to that grade. And that's a huge concern, because people have not been able to explain that. PED themselves have not been able to explain that. Lab employees who understand the statistical models have not been able to explain that. We want to come in with an approach that would be able to explain this in an easy to understand manner, because that's how we're going to get improvement, is to be able to have areas that takes beyond just looking at the reading and math component, but looks at the whole school. And what are we doing to provide opportunities for that student to learn? What are we doing to go above and beyond to keep that student engaged, to assist them along the way and hopefully higher graduation rates? So those are things that we're trying to do. And again, if we really truly want to talk about compromise, we'll keep the A through F grading system in place, but have the statistical formula that would be easy to understand, and make sure that we're not going to be swinging back and forth drastically as we've seen in other states. And we've seen.
But when you take a look at, the standards-based assessment, there are different levels that the student is graded on, and the bill that I have, how we figured some of the cost associated with the reading and math intervention, it's called the beginning steps. Those are the children that we are using to get the guesstimate of how much this would cost to do about, to work with intervention both in reading and math. And it's about maybe 2,600 kids if you're looking at reading, and we're estimating about the same number, just as guesstimates for kinder, and of course it goes all the way through 8th grade. But we're looking at those who are at the beginning steps out of the standards-based assessment. From there is where you begin the process of moving them along with interventions. Some they call it remediation, but it's the intervention that needs to work with the student. And in the process of doing that, again, it's working with the intervention teachers who take the student out of the classroom, working with them individually to see what type of, maybe they have a learning disability, maybe there's some other issues around their ability to learn and keep up at that point in time. But if you can work with the student, and that's what an interventionist does, is work specifically around the learning abilities of the student, begin to move them. It works. I've seen it work with some students that within a couple of years they're up to par. But sometimes for some of us, we don't all learn the same rate. And I would beg anybody in this room to tell me that we all can learn and adapt at the same rate. None of us do, because of brain development. That is a big factor that we also have to take into context, along with their environment, the issues on poverty, access to other abilities and things that they have in their communities.